Hello, heroes and Zargons. I'm Alfrich, and this is the Trials and Tribulations of Zargon, a series which details the many ways in which the Emperor's heroes foil Zargon and his minions in their plots to conquer the Empire. In it, we'll review the published quests and any house rules or modifications I'm using to make the game more interesting and challenging. My heroes this campaign are played by a single experienced player, so they cooperate, share resources, and are wise to the wiles of Zargon. The tuning I've done to the quests reflects that. In this episode, we'll cover Quest 1, The Trial. Mentor frames this quest as a training mission, though clearly this is no danger room style scenario, for he tells them, "You've learned well, my friends. Now has come the time of your first trial. You must first enter the catacombs which contain Felmarg's tomb. You must seek out and destroy Verag, a foul gargoyle who hides in these catacombs. This quest is not easy, and you must work together in order to survive. This is your first step on the road to becoming true heroes. Tread carefully, my friends." The Trial might be the best rules-as-written adventure in the original quest pack. Its position is unfortunate, however, because it is a killer for first-time heroes. It's a suitable challenge to rekindle the thirst for adventure in seasoned hero players, however. There are other introductory quests, namely The Maze from the original UK release and New Beginnings available online from Hasbro. If you're running for new heroes, unless they're gamers, you might want to run one of those. However, for seasoned questers, what makes the Trial awesome is its challenge, not its fitness as a tutorial quest. Even if the heroes play with perfect strategy, and Zargon's monsters mindlessly walk up to them as they stand in doorways, the heroes will have a tough time leaving intact. In the current playthrough, Zargon got his first kill before the heroes even encountered either of the bosses for this quest. The dwarf's metal failed him against a Fimir in the weapon rack room. To be fair, that dwarf had hacked his way through a Chaos Warrior in the library and got really unlucky first. For his efforts, the heroes got one of the tropiest treasures in the entire game, a rack full of rusted weapons that cannot be used. Before we get to the blow-by-blow, however, here's an outline of the dungeon. The heroes start in the southwest quadrant, where, upon exiting the room with the stairs, they can go north or east. The rooms in this part of the catacomb are quite well appointed, and the infamous weapon rack appears in the easternmost room of the southwest quadrant, just to tantalize the heroes with dreams of wealth. The dungeon extends one room into the southeast quadrant, and that room is perhaps the most dangerous in the dungeon. It contains 2 Chaos Warriors whose 4 attack dice can be deadly to heroes rolling only 2 defend dice. Heroes are often reluctant to expend spells on these monsters, since they know that Verag and likely Felmarg lie ahead. The center room, as it often will, houses the dungeon's greatest challenge. 2 Orcs and a Chaos Warrior join Verag in this room. The northeast quadrant contains a secondary villain for the dungeon, the restless corpse of Felmarg. As a brief aside, as a child growing up in America, I found the idea of a mega dungeon in D&D or other dungeon crawl games cool, but incredibly unrealistic. However, after traveling Europe and perhaps more importantly, having a look at the catacomb map underlying major European cities, I find them a lot more credible. There are an estimated 200 miles worth of catacombs beneath Paris, for example. Anyway, back to the dungeon. As you likely note, there are no traps or secret doors in this dungeon, and the quest book instructs Zargons to let the heroes know this. There is also precious little treasure to be found, only 3 chests containing a combined 204 gold coins, with one of those chests containing nothing. If the heroes pool the money together, one warrior will be able to buy a helm or a shield, but they'll be hoping for some good draws from that treasure deck to bolster the cash if they wish to upgrade offense. In our most recent playthrough of this dungeon, we only implemented one house rule. Each room could be searched for treasure only once. The only time having all 4 heroes search for treasure makes much sense is when you're either A, playing with children who might feel cheated because they never get the opportunity to find anything, or B, are playing with a group of people who've decided to play the heroes as sort of friendly competitors, mercenaries out for themselves first and foremost. By the conclusion of the first quest pack, we were using a whole raft of house rules, and the first episode of this series outlines the ones that most directly affect in-dungeon play. This playthrough went swimmingly for Zargon. The heroes, perhaps in their overconfidence, perhaps in their desire to test their own mettle, briefly split the party. 2 heroes kicked open the door immediately north of the stairwell room, making mincemeat of the orc and goblin within. These creatures did their duty, though, for that distraction allowed the dwarf and the elf to get into hot water with the Chaos Warriors, though they ultimately dispatched them before the barbarian and wizard could get into position to help. The heroes attempted to regroup in the southwest quadrant, with the wizard and the barbarian heading north through the study, while the dwarf and the elf headed south through the weapon rack room. This is when the dwarf's luck ran out. 3 skulls from a Fimir attack ended his life. The 3 remaining heroes learned their lessons, staying together to clean out the central chamber, and then, having accomplished that chief goal, almost decided discretion was the better part of valor, beating a hasty retreat to the stairs rather than facing down Felmarg in his chambers. I was silently praying that the heroes would make their escape and give me the opportunity to turn Felmarg into a returning villain. In the end, though, the stakes for failure were so low and the potential humiliation for failing to face down all the foes was so high that the heroes ventured into Felmarg's tomb and eked out a total victory. I haven't a lot to add to this quest. The heroes' decision to split up despite knowing the board and knowing the challenge levels certainly made the game interesting. With no equipment, death is virtually meaningless for the heroes, and that frees Zargon up to be brutal. Even so, I didn't run this as the first quest for my son, and I would think carefully about who I was introducing to the game before I started other new players on this board. Because for some players, what they gain in enthusiasm on account of overcoming a major challenge is outweighed by the sense of frustration that a loss, sometimes multiple losses, on this quest would generate. All in all, the trial might be the most difficult quest in the original game, though that is hard to measure because the later challenges are overcome with the help of better gear. And that is part of what makes this quest memorable for heroes and Zargons alike. Because this quest is such a classic, I have a hard time recommending changes to it to improve new player experience. If a player is the type to be put off by a game when encountering difficulties at first, I would rather give them the opportunity to play this quest in all its glory later in their career. That way, like the rest of us, they can marvel that the original quest designers thought such a challenge was a good idea out of the gate. If you're about to Zargon some new heroes, I hope this retrospective helps you think about whether to start your game with this quest. And if you're an old hand of the quest, I'd love to hear some of your war stories in the comments below. Either way, if you want to keep up to date with this Zargon's efforts to make mincemeat of a band of plucky adventurers, please do that YouTube thing and like and subscribe.